I think.
I think so.
Yes. Hello and welcome to another edition of Interview with Irene. Today I have talented Joe Eliseon with me, and thank you so much, Joe, for joining me.
You're welcome, Irene. It's a pleasure to be here.
Could we start by talking a little bit about your background?
Sure. Um, I'm. I was born into a Italian American family in an Italian American community, and it took me some time to realize that there were people who weren't Italian, and I felt very sorry for them, but there was nothing I could do. My And the funny thing was, I can remember my best friend growing up when I was a little boy, in kindergarten or so, was a boy named Michael Stewart. And I always thought Michael was Italian, but turned out he wasn't. and, but So I grew up in not a small town, but a suburb of Boston, Massachusetts. And um, that flavors a lot of the things I write. Some things that I write are very nostalgic about childhood in the 1960s. And I grew up, I went to public schools, I went to high school in my hometown, uh, I went to college in New England, and I ended up going to law school. Uh, when you're a kid, people keep asking you, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I would always say, I would always struggle for an answer to this. So I finally settled on, I want to be a lawyer in order, in order to find an answer to the question and shut people up. And you got to be careful what you say in life, because sometimes you say it too much and you end up doing it. And I woke up one day in Manhattan in a law firm office, and the diploma was on the wall, and I said, "Oh my God, how did I get here?" And so there I was. So I worked in New York for a few years, and that's reflected in my writing too. And I've been a bachelor all my life. I'm back. I came back to to Boston. I practiced here for many years. Pretty much I'm pretty much retired now from the law practice, and here I am.
That's an incredible. How did you get into writing?
Oh, I've been asked that question a number of times, and I realize I've probably given 3 or 4 different answers. And it's not because I'm trying to trick people or I'm trying to make up stories. It's because whenever you find yourself doing something in life, there are always different factors that come into play and different causes. And I was thinking that what really started me off, I mean, aside from you have sort of childhood penchant. I remember I used to write my own comic books when I was a little kid. And but what really started me off here was that a friend of mine, while I was living in New York, gave me John Kennedy Toole's novel, A Confederacy of Dunces. And I learned, I was fascinated by this book. And I learned that Mr. Toole had killed himself when he couldn't find a publisher. And that just broke my heart. And I said to myself, it just made such an impression on me because it's such a good novel. And I resolved that I wanted to write something in the same vein, sort of a picaresque novel where nothing much happens, but the main character goes through many different experiences. And that's how I wrote The Seamless Web, which was my debut novel. And I remember I tried to market that novel, and I went to dozens, if not hundreds, of different agents, and only one read it. And he came back and he said to me, "Well, this is a little too broad." And I was looking for something more like John Gresham. And I said to him, "You're going to have to look a long time because there isn't anybody else like John Gresham." So, so after that, after trying to sell that for some time, I sort of put it aside. I let it sit in a drawer, and it aged for a few years like a fine cheese. And then in the, I guess sometime in the 2000s, I read this article. I guess it was not too long. I guess it was actually around 2012 or so. I read an article about self-publishing on Amazon, and how some people had managed to find audiences who that you wouldn't be able to find through a traditional publisher. And I said to myself, well, I've got this manuscript. Let me polish it up and put it out there on Amazon. And that's what I did. And that sort of led me to where I am right now. Why did I do that? I'll ask your next question for you. At the time, I had a health issue. I had come down with diabetes, and it was never diagnosed, and I collapsed. And I had to spend a year. I lost my eyesight, and I had to spend a year not practicing law. And during the time, my practice, the little practice I had, pretty much fell apart. And I was deciding what to do with the rest of my life. And I said to myself, do I really want to start a law practice again? I had done it. I'd started, there were several different phases of my career in which I totally reinvented myself each time. And I really wanted to write rather than dedicate myself to a full-time law practice. And that's where I am.
And now you have a new book out. Could we talk a little bit about that?
My new book is the latest in my Snarky and Putz Paranormal Attorneys at Law series. And this is a sketch for the cover. I don't know if you can see it too well, but this is a sketch done by my cover artist, Angel Nichols, and she always does very good work. So I'm very pleased with her. And I give her a tough time. This isn't exactly what I want, but I'll get it out of her sooner or later. And but Snarky and Putz is I said to myself, I need a genre. I need to write in a genre. What's a popular genre? And I said, well, the paranormal's a popular genre, and you have all these paranormal detectives running around, but there aren't any paranormal lawyers. So I'll invent a pair of paranormal lawyers. And I have a formula. It's a pretty general formula, but in each book, I try to have a particular legal problem and a particular type of monster or spirit that Snarky and Putz have to deal with. And Snarky and Putz are both amalgamations of different lawyers I've known through my life. And Snarky is the senior lawyer, the more aggressive lawyer, and he's always taking advantage of Putz. But Putz is the man who has the real talent. And he's the one who really does the hard work in each case. And Snarky always manages to come in at the last minute and save the day because he's sort of an intuitive lawyer. But this particular story is called, it's not out yet, it'll be out in a few weeks. It's called Snarky and Putz 4, The Case of the Unchained Immigrant. And it has to do with immigration law and a demon from another culture who has found his way into the United States. And Snarky and Putz have to figure out how to deal with clients from abroad and monsters from abroad. And that's what it's about.
I imagine it will be very popular because it sounds timely to what's going on now.
Well, that was my general marketing idea.
Yes. So, well, that's good. So, it's interesting to hear what inspires you and how your life as an attorney also inspired your work and your writing. Do you have any other hobbies?
Do I have any other hobbies? I thought writing was my hobby, but not right now. I used to be. I'm an inveterate collector. I had a fairly extensive comic book collection at one time, which I have largely sold off. You just get tired of things after a while. I'm still interested in comic books, but I'm interested in comic books as juvenile literature. And I think that when you try to make it into an adult medium, you're asking more of the art form than it can bear, than it can support. And
Right.
I don't like the direction that most comics go into these days. And one thing, it leads to what I call hypertropism. I mean, every book is about saving the universe from some terrible menace. I used to love, there were certain comic books I used to love as a child. One of them was the DC comic book, The Atom. Many of the stories were by a writer named John Broome. And the Atom was a tiny little superhero. And the question was always, how can he make his small size an advantage in dealing with these very tightly written detective stories? And I love a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what fascinated me as a kid was just they could tell these stories in like 8 pages, and they'd be complete stories. So I mean, that's what I like about comic books, and that's what attracted me to collecting. I collect all sorts of things, but that's about it for right now.
That's fantastic. But I also like how on your Twitter bio you say dogs love me but they can't read.
Well, I've had a humbling experience with regard to dogs over the last weekend. I finally met a dog who didn't like me, and
Uh-oh.
he's a very large pit bull terrier, and he just growls at me whenever I appear. I don't understand it, but I always, I've had a couple of dogs in my life, and I grew up with a complete mutt, and she was a great dog. She was my constant companion growing up, and when I was a young man, my parents bought a Labrador puppy, and he was the most intelligent dog I have ever known. And I've known some pretty bright dogs, but his name was MacArthur. And I swear, this dog had more friends than I did. I'd be out in my backyard, and I'd hear a knock on the gate, and little kids from the neighborhood I had never seen before would ask to come in and play with MacArthur. And I would wonder, how did they know that he's here? How did they know who he is?
Oh my God. Yeah.
But MacArthur liked mailmen. All the mailmen on the route were very friendly with him. Um, he was a show dog for a while until until he injured his paw and he went off standard. But he was just a very bright dog. You could actually say to him, MacArthur, go pick up the red ball. And I know dogs aren't supposed to be able to see colors. But you'd say, Doc, go pick up the red ball. And there'd be a red ball and a blue ball at the other end of the room. And he'd go trotting off toward the red ball. And then halfway there, you could say, no, MacArthur, I changed my mind. Get the blue ball. And he'd turn around and go for the blue ball. I don't know how he did it, but he'd do it.
That's so good. He sounds like an amazing pet. Well, and then lastly, any advice for future writers?
Well, I have a policy of never giving advice unless you're asked. But you've asked me.
Yes.
So I would say this. I'm not somebody who encourages writers no matter what. Because I think writing is hard. And it's hard, and you have to have a smidgen of innate talent. And you also have to want to do it very much. It's very frustrating. It's very, it's a performance craft, too, when you're writing fiction. And you have to expose yourself. You have to reveal yourself. It can sometimes be a bitter pill. So if you're writing, and if you're doubting your abilities, if you feel bad about it, my advice is stop writing for a while and see if you're happy without doing it. And if you are, don't do it anymore, because it's like banging your head against the wall sometimes. But if you find yourself missing it, well, that's the desire to write. If you just find that your life isn't complete without doing it, then go back and do it, and just hone your craft as much as you can, and realize that writing is marketing yourself. And just like being a lawyer, you can lots of people like to practice law. They like to do the things that lawyers do, but you actually have to go out and sell that too. If you're in a big firm, you have to sell yourself to your partners. If you're in a little firm, you have to sell yourself to your clients. It's, that's part of what you do. And it's the same thing with being a writer. And I say that because I'm not terribly good at selling myself. And I often say, oh, what the heck? I'm doing this because I like to do it. But you have to. So I remember at one point in my legal career, I said to myself, I'm too nice. I can't be this nice. I won't survive. So I taught myself to be a little bit tough. And it worked.
That's good. I think that's very good advice for any field you want to get into. But thank you so much again for joining us, Joe, and hope to have you again sometime.
Oh, I'd love it, Irene. Thank you very much for having me on.
You're welcome. And thank you again for joining me for another edition interview with Irene, and we'll see you next time. Bye.